So I'm just kind of weeding through. I just removed a wire that came from the front and went back, and then it just ended here. And so remove that. Just trying to sort through all the unnecessary stuff. Here's a black wire. Don't know where it was intended to go. There's a red wire. Don't know where it was intended to go. We'll set these aside and see where they go at the other end. But I'm trying to get it down to just the loom, wiring loom stuff that we know where it goes. So like the orange with the white, I know that's the main contactor coil, and the blue with white is the return for the coil. So we know where those things are going to go. So we're just kind of sorting through. Got a lot of things like this. So going to eliminate those. These to me are the worst connectors in the whole world. Might be fine for emergency kind of use if you had to splice something in, but I don't recommend them in the normal course of doing things. They're time bombs, and so not recommended. We've got some other stuff that's just, here's one that a black wire just comes and ends here. So I'm going to kind of trace everything at this point and see where they're going. The ones that I know where they need to go, we'll pull those and separate things out, and we'll make heads or tails of this actually pretty quickly and know what we're going to use and what we don't need to use. Those two wires right there that I've got laid out of the way, those are coming from the charger, and so they would tie in again to our shunt and to our positive traction pack connections in here. So we're going to take a look at all that. To me, this is the fun part. I enjoy the wiring. That's my favorite part of a conversion. And so, not too exciting to watch. So I'll be back. So we're still doing some sorting of wires, but I went ahead and found a location to put what we're going to have in the front here. So we're going to have a terminal strip. We've got our reversing relay. We've got our safety interlock relay and our AVC2. So I was interrupted by the phone, so not sure where I left off, but we have our safety interlock relay, AVC2, reversing relay, and a terminal strip, and it mounts against this piece right here, and kind of close right here to the speedometer cable. We got plenty of clearance and everything elsewhere, so we'll work fine. And so we'll continue to clean this up, and as I'm cleaning up and identifying stuff, that's why I put this in. We'll start making those connections also, kind of two at the same time there. So that's where we are at this moment. We'll come back when we get more progress. Well, I made it sound pretty easy in that we would just install our components, seen right here, and then wire it up. And really, that is easy. But the part that took me longer than will to do all the rest of it was to sort out the issues with the car. This car has quite a few electrical issues, let's say. And the one that was causing a problem for me was that there was no ignition signal. And so we're not, you know, we're not being paid to make repairs to the vehicle itself. But we had to, one, see what was incorrect and correct it. And so we've got our line coming in from the battery, as I mentioned earlier, this red with the white stripe. And this is where, next to it here, is where you're supposed to have the ignition signal when the ignition switch is turned on. Nada. So there was a lot of miswiring on here, so we had to correct some of that to the point at least where we have an ignition signal now. So now we will have our unswitched 12 volts, which we're going to put over here on our terminal strip. So I'm probably going to go ground, unswitched 12 volts, switch 12 volts, and so forth. And so, yeah, that can happen sometimes, especially if you're starting with a car that, you know, wasn't running ahead of time. A lot of people say they'd like to get a car that's not running, an old car. Well, that means sometimes you have to take care of a few other things. This is not our vehicle, so it's not our concern to fix all of its underlying issues, but we had to do enough to get it to where we have, you know, an ignition switched source, because we don't want our conversion system on all the time. There are certain elements that are on all the time, like the JLD 404, it runs all the time, but the rest of it's going to be switched by the ignition switch. And we could have just simply taken off of, you know, 12 volt source and gone through another switch and, you know, basically made our own switched setup. But, you know, to me, the conversion should be just like the original car. You turn the key and go. So anyway, it took a little troubleshooting to figure out what had been changed, and so to fix it back around to make it work. And so now we're ready to do what I thought I was going to do an hour ago. Making progress on our wiring, and just a little kind of reminder that, you know, when you're doing a job, it always goes by easier, more enjoyable if you're prepared and you're organized. And so we have, you know, a little workstation right nearby, so I don't have to do as much moving around, walking around, and I keep it right near where I'm working. Here's the progress in the under the rear seat. Coming along. You can see my work table can move wherever it needs to be. Nice and close to where I'm working. Going to be working on the dash next. So we'll be wiring up our reverse switch, our coast switch, and our JLD 404. So you can see I have the tools that I'll need right here. I believe we showed you the DC to DC converter mounted in place right there. That is wired. Let's take a look at the engine bay. Don't think anything new here really. We're going to reroute the cables that are coming into the inverter, the positive and negative lines, and that's because the way they are routed right now, they come in, as you saw from our rear box here, they come in here. So our battery connections will be here. our main contactor, and here our shunt. So on the negative side of the shunt, you know, it's going to go to the contactor, I mean the controller, and from the contactor right here, it goes to the controller. Well, they've got these marked. This is plus, plus, plus. Well, that's actually on the negative, and you couldn't switch them around because they have different sized lugs. So this is one size, and that's another. So, you know, not like you could switch them around, but that's mismarked for some reason. So we got to confirm on the other end that it's, you know, that we have it correct. But what I was talking about is that's where those wires are coming in, which is on the driver's side of the vehicle. Well, the way they're run now is they go over the top of the transaxle, and then you can see them right there coming over the transaxle, and they're down on the ground right there, and then they came up through these two holes up to here. So a whole lot of extra length, and which means extra, you know, support, because you don't want those things laying on top of the transaxle bouncing around everything. That's not good on the insulation, and you don't want the wires bouncing around anyway. They need to be secure. So what we're going to do is we're going to reroute those, and we're going to be able to cut that length in half, and we're going to come through on this side here and go right here instead of coming in, going over, and coming up. So that's one of the items on the agenda. Next, though, I'm going to finish this wiring from front to rear here on the, you know, the control wiring. So everything is wired up in our little under seat box here, with the exception of the shunt. So the shunt control wires, the leads that go to the gauge, those have not been run yet. So, and I didn't see anything that they, you know, had to accommodate that. And so that's what I'm going to do next. This stuff here is just wiring that's not used right here. This goes to the throttle. And so this is what is used that's going to the front. So we're going to run two more lines up front. We added a grommet. Remember previously that was just a hole. We put the grommet in place. And so we'll run those two additional wires. There's one more wire. There's actually three additional wires we're going to run. The shunt, and then we need a traction pack positive, which we'll take off of right here, and that will be for our JLD 404, so it can measure the traction pack voltage. So three more wires to the front, and I think that is it. And so I'm going to do those, and then we're going to wire our in-dash items, the two switches and the JLD 404. So that's just kind of a little status update of where I am, and then I'll kind of clean up what I've done a little bit. But yeah, coming right along. We twist the pair of wires that are running from the shunt to our meter, and you do that so that you're not picking up, you know, there isn't any induced voltage in that line to cause an erroneous reading. And simply, I should have showed you, but we simply take one end of the two wires and put them in the vise, and we take the other end and put it in the drill, and you spin it around. You have to cut the wire longer than you need, because as you twist them, the length will shorten somewhat. But anyway, I made extra for another project that I also have going. But so connect this to our terminal strip, and from the terminal strip it's going to the JLD 404.